Hey guys, it's me, Miss Norris, and welcome to the fourth and final Fun Fall Read Aloud of October. Today I will be reading the story Georgie and the Robbers. The story Georgie and the Robbers was written in 1963 by Robert Bright, and it tells the story of a very sweet little ghost. If you're ready to hear the story, I'm ready to share it with you. Here we go. Georgie and the Robbers. You can see Georgie's there on the title page of the book. I'm sorry, the cover of the book. On the title page, we also have Georgie and his cat. This is Georgie, the gentle little ghost. He lives in the Whittaker house. Every night, as everybody knows, Georgie has to creak the stairs and squeak the parlor door to remind Mr. and Mrs. Whittaker that it's time to go to bed and to sleep. But Georgie never scared anybody. He was much too shy for that. So he had no idea of what he might have to do if strangers came into the house. Now, one night, Mr. and Mrs. Whittaker went to a church sociable in the village, and just as usual, they didn't even bother to lock the door. So this is Georgie, and there are the Whittakers, and they live all in the same house, and Georgie's never really had to scare anybody, so he's not sure what he would do. They never gave a thought to all the cozy antique furniture they had, like the cozy old rocker on the porch where Miss Oliver the owl sometimes liked to perch, or like the comfortable old sofa in the parlor where Herman the cat often snoozed. So the Whittakers have gone out. They didn't lock their door, and they didn't think about their antique furniture like the rocker that Mrs. Oliver likes to perch on, and the couch that Herman the cat likes to snooze on. Or like all the old things that cluttered up the attic where Georgie lived. There wasn't an attic anywhere that was more cluttered than Georgie's attic. It was full of old things no one could bear to part with. Now, old things like that are antiques and worth a lot of money. That is why there are people who sometimes try to steal them. Dun, dun, dun! So Georgie has a very nice attic with very old antiques that people can't bear to part with. And some people want to take these things to make money. That night, after the Whittakers had left the house, two strangers came down the country road. They drove a fast truck and wore masks. They were robbers. See those masks, and they're coming down the road, and they're coming to steal things. Boo. They took the rockers from the Whittakers' porch because they were old and antique. They're loading up their wagon, and Herman the cat is watching from the window, and it doesn't look very happy. And they took the sofa from the parlor because it was even older than the rocking chairs and more antique. Oh, Herman is trying to help, but he doesn't really know what to do, but that's his favorite place to sleep. And that sofa's old. But from Georgie's attic, they took everything. Every last thing. Because everything up there was the oldest and most antique of all. Now, that was a fine how do you do. So, the attic where Georgie is where Georgie lives is where they have the oldest, most antique things. And they took everything except for Georgie and the mice. Boo. Herman ran after the truck and Georgie after Herman. But the robbers went so fast they would have gotten clean away if it hadn't been for Mrs. Oliver. She flew high under the moon and watched them. Suddenly, she heard a bang. The robber's truck had a blowout. A blowout is another word to say they got a flat tire. And if you have a flat tire, you can't really go anywhere else. So they were going very fast, but Miss Oliver, the owl, she chased after them. She could fly faster than anybody could run. Miss Oliver flew after the robbers and saw where they hid the truck to fix the tire. It was in the barn where the harmless cow lived. The robbers drove the truck in and they put the cow out of her own barn. So these bad guys had to get their wagon off the road before they could change the tire because they didn't want anyone to see their wagon and find out what they were up to. So they kicked the cow out of her own barn. Miss Oliver flew straight back to tell Herman and Georgie. Herman decided that he had better run to the village to warn Mr. and Mrs. Whittaker and the policeman. But Georgie and Miss Oliver went to be with the cow in the meadow. So they weren't as Herman the cat went to get Mr. and Mrs. Whittaker and the police. And Georgie and Miss Oliver went to go keep the cow company. They weren't going to go after the robbers. They're going to make sure the cow feels safe. When they got to the barn, they all knew there was just one thing to do. They must scare the robbers away. So, I guess once they found out that the cow was safe, the next thing that they needed to do was poof, scare those robbers away. But how? How would you scare a robber away? I'd make a lot of noise. The cow couldn't scare the robbers. She was much too harmless. Miss Oliver couldn't scare the robbers. She was just a soft, fuzzy owl. But Georgie was a ghost. And maybe he should have been able to scare somebody. But Georgie was such a gentle ghost. He was so little. So, Georgie is the perfect candidate to be the one who scares the robbers. But he's a little scared because he thinks he's such a little ghost. Oh, if I could only be a big, scary ghost, just for once, Georgie thought. I just want to be a big ghost instead of a little ghost. Just then, a wind came and began to billow the cover that kept the hay dry on the haystack in the back of the barn. And Georgie looked at the cow, and he looked at Miss Oliver, and he looked at the haystack. And although he was a very small ghost, Georgie had a really big idea. So what do you think he's going to do? He's seeing this tarp that usually keeps hay dry, but it's flapping around, and it gives Georgie an idea. Do you think you know? Let's see. Now, the robbers were inside the barn fixing the tire, and They were already nervous. Suddenly, something came to the window and said, "Moo." And that bothered the robbers, although they knew it must be a cow. What else says moo? So the robbers, they're a little scared. You know when you're already a little nervous and even silly things can make you feel jumpy. But what else moos? Probably a cow. Next, something flew under the eaves and it said, "Hoo!" And that startled the robbers, although they knew it must be an owl. Good old Miss Oliver, swooping down. And what else could say, "Woo," but an owl? But then something else flitted past the door and it said, "Boo!" And that made the robbers both jump and drop their tools because they knew that a cow said moo and they knew that an owl said hoo. But what was it that said boo? The robbers were so upset they had to go outside and look. They're freaking out now because everything kind of has its own sound. And what else says boo? But they're going to go check it out. Now, what they saw at the corner of the barn was the flick of a white tail. But while it made their teeth chatter, they weren't scared enough to run. So they saw just a tail going around the barn, but not enough. It scared them, but they're not going to run. So they turned the corner of the barn and saw the flutter of white wings and one half of one big eye. But while it made their knees knock together, they weren't scared enough to run. Well, these are bad guys. They've probably seen some pretty scary stuff. So when they see just an eye and a wing flapping in the breeze, they're scared, but they're already a little scared. And then they're not going to run. So then they tiptoed next to the corner of the barn. They're sneaking around the side. And there they saw the biggest ghost in the world. So Georgie's gotten significantly bigger. Notice, that's not all Georgie. He used his big idea to be an extra big ghost, and it's working. That was enough to scare anybody. So the robbers are running away, and you can see Miss Oliver's chasing them a little bit. And the cow is like, "Wow." And Georgie's like, "Bye-bye, bad guys." The robbers ran and they ran. They ran straight into the arms of the village policeman. Because remember, Herman went to get the Whittakers and the policeman. So we have the Whittakers standing by, the policeman, and the robbers, they just gave up. They really had no other choice. And there's Oh, I thought that was oh, there's Herman saving the day, or at least helping to, right? But Georgie was so surprised at himself for what he had done, he ran too. He ran and he ran. He ran straight home to tell the mice how he scared the robbers. So Georgie thought that was a pretty exciting adventure. And he's going to go home and he's going to tell the mice all about his adventures. That same night, the neighbors helped put the rocking chairs back on the porch and the sofa back in the parlor again. So the neighbors helped them bring home all of their things. Look at the kitty just strutting around. Yeah, bring my couch back. But best of all, they began putting everything, every last thing, back into the attic again until it was properly cluttered with all the nice old things no one could bear to part with. Home sweet home. All of this clutter is coming back. And the little mouse is like, right this way, right this way. Better places to hide for mice. And Georgie would stand on the old trunk and show the mice what had happened at the cow barn. He showed them over and over. So he stands on this trunk with all of the mice looking at him from every place in the attic, and he tells about how brave he was at the cow barn. And every night he creaked the stairs and squeaked the parlor door again. But although Georgie knows, and the mice know, and Herman knows, and Miss Oliver knows, and the cow knows, and although you and I, not even until this very day, even you and I know, but not even until this very day, do the Whittakers know who scared the robbers. So there's a lot of people who know about Georgie, but Mr. and Mrs. Whittaker are not one of those people. You and me, we know. The end. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you really enjoyed the story of Georgie and the robbers. If you did, please hit that thumbs up button at the bottom of the page. If you're already a subscriber, thank you so much for your support. It really means a lot to me. If you're not a subscriber yet, please click the subscribe button down there at the bottom of the page. And don't forget to click the bell so that you're notified when there's new content. Also, even though this is the last Fall Fun Friday Read Aloud of October, please tune in Tuesday for an extra special bonus Halloween Read Aloud. I hope to see you again real soon. Bye-bye.